All right, everyone. Thank you. We're on page 36 of our 35 onwards on our folders. There's no reports that I picked up, so and you've circulated some fees and charges. So, Kitty, do you want to take us through your budget? Thank you. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you. I've got quite a few key points, but I'll try and keep them as brief as I can. The recycling rate, I'm proposing to hold the recycling rate steady next year, put up the rubbish collection rates owing to the increase in waste levy, because that impacts on the rubbish disposal charges, and also proposing to increase organics bins by $2 a bin as signalled in the previous long-term plan, and that's because of CPI increases to disposal charges. Also proposing the rubbish bag charges increased to $3.20 per bag, and that's a mix of levy increase and CPI increases in bag costs. Also, the bin delivery charges will go up 50 cents to $18 with a maximum charge of $36 for 2 or 3 bins. And because the rubbish rate will be going up, for the rubbish bins, the fee for rubbish bin swap up will increase to $31.75 from $30. I've made an additional $50,000 budget allowance to continue with the maintenance level of recycling bin audits. Note that this may need to be increased, and that will depend on how well further audits, which have yet to be approved by Council, that we propose these to get done to improve recycling quality over the next few months. And staff would bring a report to Council to seek additional budget in the 21-22 year for that, should that prove to be necessary. So hopefully that'll be coming through at deliberations. I'm recommending that $70,600 of the increased levy funding we're expecting will come to the budget to help fund the audits and recycling processing costs, and that the $200,000 per annum transfer from the general rate be stopped a year early. That is not apply for next year. Should be noted the total increase in rates between this and next year in the curbside collection budget sheet is caused by the continual growth in the district. It's resulted in more bins being in service than we projected for the current year. I'm expecting there will be over 1,600 more recycling bins and 1,600 more rubbish bins in circulation, and 530 odd more organics bins at the start of 21-22 than we had projected for 2021. So although the rate increase is fairly minor, the overall rate increase because of that is quite substantial. In the waste minimisation account, I'm proposing that the general rate be increased from $20,000 to $21,700 to fund more council overheads and service recovery charges, and an increase in litter management costs. The increase in landfill levy will start providing additional funds at the end of the first quarter, and the census population numbers should also result in a slight increase to our district, and our forecast will receive an additional $143,000 in the coming year. I'm proposing that placeholder budget allowances be made for an additional $10,000 for both the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee and for rural recycling facility operations, and note that council approval still needs to be sought for the provision of rural recycling services. We've made some decreases to some operational budgets that partially offset these proposed increased budgetary allowances. I note on page 3.2, I haven't got a date for the rural recycling infrastructure. That should read from 21-22 to 25-26. So it'll be a 5-year program of rolling out new recycling facilities to 5 new rural areas.
It's just the near the bottom of page 43 on your agenda.
Yep.
Thanks, Jury.
And that's just a budgetary allowance for that, and as I said, that will require council approval to proceed with that project. Finally, in the disposal account, I'm proposing to make no change to the general rate, that the gate charges for green waste be retained at the current charge, the general waste or rubbish charge be increased by $11.50 per tonne, which is for the levy increase only. We can absorb the ETS increases that Transwaste are proposing and any CPI increases for the contract owing to cost savings from new contract diversion activities within that budget. Proposing that clean fill and hard fill be increased by $6 a tonne to $100 a tonne, and that's for clean fill, hard fill disposed of at the transfer station, and by 4 cubic metres for clean fill and hard fill being dropped off directly to Sutherland's pit. And we're also putting the charge up for expanded polystyrene foam that is not recyclable by $11.50 per tonne, which is the waste levy, but that doesn't have impact on non-recyclable minimum charges and per unit charges. And we've also got 3 new charges for 3 different types of tyres. I apologise for some regrettable errors in the gate charge tables on pages 45 to 48, and I have circulated, highlighted and read what those charges should read. And they're the figures that I've used in my budgets, but unfortunately I hadn't transposed that into the budget commentary. The overall income to the account is estimated to increase by over $431,000, and that's increases in tonnages as well as the gate charge increases. And that includes some income through the gain and pain share agreement in the new contract. Total operating expenditure will increase by around about $254,000, and that's by a number of new budgetary allowances for asset management improvements and rates, remissions and refunds, and increases to some other budgets amounting to about $15,000 extra. But the majority of the increases in costs are related to the increase in tonnage and the increase in disposal charges. We've also reduced budgets for closed landfill maintenance and monitoring by around about $7,000. I'm also recommending that about $70,600 of the increased levy funding be used to help fund hazardous waste and recycling management and transportation costs at Southbrook and Oxford. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kitty. I might just start that off while other colleagues, but the adequacy of Southbrook in general, I've used it a few times over lately, and it's always busy when I've been down there. I know it's just post-Christmas, so it was a pretty busy period in the lead up, but there was just a lot of people there. This is a 10-year budget. Are we looking at, the adequacy of, or whether the pit is, in the recycling area is adequate in terms of its size? I know you're talking about an education area and possible extension, but in general, is it adequate what we've got?
We're having the project delivery unit look at a site development plan this year, and we have scheduled design and construction of the recycling area and reuse area upgrade and expansion. So design next year and expansion in the following year, and then the pit changes have been pushed out a couple of years just to try and help level the rates rises, but that can always be brought forward if it's deemed to be important enough.
So Peter, you are doing that work and you'll report back to us on that. In terms of I've already mentioned this to you a couple of times. Sorry? Yes, mentioned to you a couple of times about the condition down there. Have we got enough money in the budget to make sure that, and with the contract, that the place is being well maintained? Because my observation is it's not at the moment.
That is something we're dealing with Waste Management. They have given us a price in their contract for site maintenance, and we will have to talk to them about the fact that they're not living up to our expectations and how that is best managed.
Okay. But we've got money in our budgets for maintenance, painting, all those sort of things of the general condition, apart from the land, which, as you're saying, you're going to deal with, but there's money in there to make sure that it's kept looking sharp.
We've got maintenance budget for the work that we see as necessary, and they have in the contract operations budgets, their mowing and weeding, etc., should be covered in that.
Okay, maybe at our next working party or UNR, bring us a bit of an update on that. Thank you.
I'm intending to bring a report to the Solid and Hazardous Waste Working Party about the pathway forward for forward maintenance on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Barney?
Kitty, reports on the street are that audited areas are improving but non-audited areas aren't, and we're still receiving very high levels of recycling contamination. Are you confident that the money you've gotten here is going to be sufficient to actually make sure that we crack down on the non-audited areas to try and get to a level that's satisfactory?
The maintenance budget I'd allowed for was to keep recycling at the levels that we got to after the audits. I will be bringing a report to council to increase the budget for auditing in this current year, and I may have to increase the budget in next year if we have to carry on the budgets into 21-22. So we may have more budget allowance. We reached 50% acceptance, which is quite a distinct improvement over what it used to be, but there's a long way to go.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Doody?
Just carrying on from that, Kitty, this is everybody's having to pay for a few that are not adhering to the thing. Is there any way that you can charge them extra for the service that they do not want, of course, but are having to do it?
There's no way we can charge extra, but we will remove bins if people do not comply. 2 bins have been removed. I believe there's another couple that are going to be uplifted, and there's, I think last time I checked, there were 9 on the removal list to be removed next time they put them out for collection, but they haven't been. So at least those bins haven't been presented and haven't been contaminating the recycling stream.
Okay. No further questions. So is there any general remarks anyone would like to make? Wendy?
Kitty, thank you very much when you're talking about the next waste meeting, and I'm just wondering if perhaps we could go and have a look at the whole area down at Southbrook as a collective.
I have intended, I'm waiting for the PDU to bring back the plan, which I'll discuss with you, and at that point it might be appropriate for us to go there on site and just sort of have a look and see what we intend to go where, or what could go where. Yeah.
The other thing I'd just like to make a comment is I did take some down to the reuse shop, and I was actually really impressed with the service there and the staff. Thank you.
I'd just like to add to that, I think the staff actually particularly helpful, and went out of their way that I observed with other people there to make sure that they were doing the right thing. You've had a particularly trying year with everything that's been going on, and certainly the mixed messaging that the city didn't help with, and I think the waste audit's certainly been a lot of challenge in that space, but I've also be interested to see where that's reporting on that at some stage and how that's going in general. So because obviously we've put a lot of effort into trying to get people to do the right thing again, so hopefully that's continuing, but the audit's been a really an essential part of that. So thanks to you, Manise and team. I think you're doing a really good job in this space, and look forward to those updates that we talked about on Southbrook, and I'm not in touch with what's happening in Oxford apart from what is put there, but if we are having a look at Southbrook, it might be a good opportunity to have a look at Oxford at some stage as well, just to gain a bit of a better picture of how things are going up there. Thank you. So, you're done. That's it. Thank you. So, next is water. So Colin and Kelly. Thanks, Kitty. So the page is 59 on in the papers. We've got no other. I don't think we've got any. I'm just double checking on that. Perhaps
there is a report referred from UNR
4.4, is it?
Yep.
Shall we deal with that first? We go to 4.4, so I'll just get the right paper, sorry. .4, so that's tab 6 in our pages, so you want to cover that first and then we'll go into the pages.
Yep.
In your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll just quickly talk through the report under item 4.4, which is on the Pegasus filter sand. So this has been reported to the Utilities and Roading Committee and has been recommended by that committee before, so I won't go into too much detail, but just to give a quick overview. So the in general, the Pegasus manganese removal filter has performed very well since conversion to a biological filter. We did see when we added the wood end flows into it as well that there was some loss of performance during peak flow conditions, and because of this we topped up the sand in one filter, which we had noticed was lower than expected, with a higher or a different grade of sand, and that improved performance, so that's been good. However, through the study into that performance, we did note that as flows increase further with growth, which there is a lot of growth forecast for that scheme, we are expecting that the performance will drop away if we leave the sand as it is, which would lead to a risk of an increased risk of biofilm growth on the scheme. So to address this, we're recommending that the sand be completely replaced with a coarser grain of sand, so rather than 0.6 millimeter, be 0.9, which doesn't sound significant, but in terms of the amount of manganese you can remove per cubic meter of sand, it is actually does increase the capacity for by manganese removal quite a lot, and in turn that removes the expected biofilm growth rates. So the recommendation is to put in $120,000 of budget in year 3 of the long-term plan period to do this. As this is related to growth, the costs would be covered through contributions from the Ravenswood development, so we're not forecasting a rating impact as a result of that, given it would be a growth project. So happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Debbie?
Thank you. And just, Colin, just want to know, what do you do with the used sand, with the manganese and things like that? And can it just go back onto the ground, or do you have to?
That's a good question, and I think that's, although the report into it is very thorough, that hasn't actually been considered. It would be, it's not contaminated sand or anything. It's sterile enough to have drinking water pass through it, so it would. There's bound to be a use for it. We would have to work with the contractor on what that use would be, but it wouldn't be a waste. I'm sure there'd be use.
Good. Thank you.
Any further questions? There's a recommendation to allowing that provision. Someone prepared to move? Moved by Councillor Barnett, seconded by Councillor Becker. Councillor Barnett?
Yes, when this report was presented to UNR, it was completely sensible. Very, very important that we do treat the manganese. I've seen the results when we don't and the complaints that we get from the public. So I think it's a very, very sensible thing to do, and fully in support of this recommendation.
Councillor Blakey, do you wish to? Any further speakers? Councillor Doody?
At UNR, we just thank Gary very much for this effort he's put into it, and I just want that to be relayed again because his effort is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Rather reply? I'll put the recommendation. So the motion, all those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So we now come to the budget papers again, so it's page 59.
Cool.
Do you have anything you wish to highlight here, Colin?
Yeah, I've got a few points to talk through. So I'll try to keep it brief because I know you've got a lot to work through. But I'll start with a little bit of the background into the setting of the budgets, talk through the rating impact, the key issues, and then just summarise the O&M and capital budgets, and then take questions. So in terms of background, there's three key components to the capital budgets, and I thought I'd give a little bit of an overview of how we came up with those budgets. So there's the three components of renewals, growth, and level of service. The renewals work, the main work we've done since the last long-term plan is we've updated our renewals model with a better understanding of base life of the pipe assets, which are by far the highest value asset class we have. So we now understand the performance of those assets better, and we've also got a new valuation report. So the expected life and the valuation data basically gives us our renewals program. So we've got a greater degree of confidence now in when we should be replacing pipes and how much we expect it to cost. And renewals makes up about $17 million of the 10-year budget. Growth is another significant area. So growth forecasts, we take the projections from planning, we feed that into the reticulation model, which is run by our network planning team, and out of that they build in that growth and recommend the what assets we'll need over the 10-year period to accommodate that growth. So that makes up the growth component of the budgets. There's about $12.4 million worth of growth projects within the first 10 years. And then the final capital budget type is level of service, which there's $12 million worth of level of service projects, and that's essentially where we're not meeting a current level of service through our performance measure reporting, or where we are aware of something like drinking water standards changing, that we identify we need new level of service projects to accommodate that. So that might be new treatment equipment, or where we're not meeting our criteria in terms of the amount of resilience or redundancy we need. That could also be a trigger for a level of service project. So collectively, those are the three broad budget types and how we go about setting them. In terms of rating impact, this is presented in Table 1. So you can see that there are some schemes with increases and some with decreases. And there's notes on the reasons for that. I thought I wouldn't go through them all because there's 14 schemes, so I think I'll just take questions on particular schemes at the end. The key issues I was going to talk through, one of the major ones is that the pending changes to standards and regulation of drinking water. So this, right at the end of last year, we had draft drinking water standards released for information, and they'll be formally released around May, we expect, this year. So that's definitely going to trigger a lot of change within the drinking water space, and we also have a new drinking water regulator expected to be established via the Water Services Bill around the middle of this year. So both of those things we know will cause change, and we've tried to make provision for how we'll deal with that change, but there is still some level of uncertainty because it includes things like exemptions, and it's not completely black and white that we can definitively say these budgets will exactly deal with these standards. We think they're the best effort we have been able to make with the information we have, but there's still some uncertainty in terms of exactly what the final standards will look like and how they'll be interpreted and how they'll be regulated. So I wanted to highlight that we have tried to deal with that uncertainty, but there is still some residual risk. Another key issue throughout, or something we've tried to deal with throughout the budgets, is the need to keep up with required source and storage upgrades. So these could be required either for resiliency or for accommodating growth, or a combination of both. And a large number of schemes have one or the other required in the coming 10 years. So an example of a resiliency type source or storage upgrade project is at Mansfield, where we've got one primary well, and last year we experienced an issue with that well, which meant during the time when we were replacing that well pump, we were down to backup wells only, and therefore didn't achieve compliance. So we've always signalled the need for a backup well at Mansfield. So that's a resiliency type project. It's not because of growth, it's just because we need redundancy for when these kind of issues happen. And then in terms of growth, there's other schemes that need projects for growth, with Rangiora being a good example, where a second reservoir at South Belt is required, as well as another sixth well after the fifth well didn't achieve the yield we were hoping for. And there's other similar projects as well on other schemes. Another key point to talk through a little is the stimulus funding. So this has also been reported and discussed quite a lot by the council, and is well underway in terms of delivery. But one thing that we have been looking into and has been considered is the equity and fairness between schemes, and in particular there's been discussions with this council before between the relationship between Points Road, Summerhill and West Eaton. So I thought I'd draw attention a little bit to those three schemes. So there's been recommendations about a contribution from Points Road to the other two schemes, and as a condition of joining, and we now have the calculated rating impact of that contribution alongside all the other things that are going on within those three schemes. So Points Road is forecast to increase by about 50% across 2 years, and then Summerhill decreased by 9% in the first year, and West Eaton by 3%. So those decreases are not purely a result of the contribution. There's been one other change that in particular has benefited Summerhill with the interest rate reduction, and Summerhill having a large loan that's meant that Summerhill has seen the biggest benefit of a reduction in interest rate, but also the contribution from Points Road has helped that as well. So I think it is seeing those three schemes rates moving closer together. I'll probably, just one more thing I was going to mention is there's a table showing the overall capital spend towards the end, which I thought I'd point out. So that is my table 4, and that shows the projected capital spend over the next 10 years. The top row is what was previous in the last annual plan, and then the second row is what we're now proposing, and it also shows the differences. So if you look to the far right, you can see we were previously projecting $44 million worth of capital works over the 10 years, and we're now proposing 41 million. So we have found some moderate savings of about 2.8 million, or 6% reduction in the capital program, as well as some ups and downs on a year-by-year basis. So a key reason for the reduction overall is the renewals expenditure. We had last time about $19 million worth of renewals budgets. Now we have about 16. So that's really the difference, and that's generally a result of our renewals model being rerun with updated asset base lives and valuation data, and yeah, across, there are lots of ups and downs on different pipe sizes and types and everything else, but there have been some pipe types where we've realised they actually have a greater, or can achieve a greater life than we'd previously assumed, and because of that, the amount of renewals we need in the first 10 years isn't quite as much as previously, so that has allowed some saving. Probably the only other significant change, as I was going to talk through, is just some shifting of budgets within the initial years, which has kind of spread out the load. So it was previously quite front loaded, with year one having a large number of 9.5 million and then some $3 million years after that, and now the numbers are more similar, with some of that year one stuff being deferred, and that is mainly UV projects being pushed out from year one because we still don't have the confidence to look at draft standards and say definitely what we're going to build, because it still depends on exemptions for chlorination, and so that it's mainly due to us not having the certainty to start construction of those works yet, has been the key driver for that. So finally, I'll just talk through the recommendations, and I think a slightly updated set has been circulated. So the first recommendation is to adopt the budgets as recommended, and then there's also recommendations passed on from the Utilities and Roading Committee in terms of changes to the level of service performance measures, so these were all recommended by Utilities and Roading Committee for inclusion in the draft long-term plan. So this is really just to confirm that that's what we're recommending goes into the draft long-term plan. You might recall that in general the changes were for ease of reporting, or to bring things up with the way some measures are currently measured, so it's not to change an actual level of service the public will notice a difference in, but more just to make our reporting more meaningful. So I wasn't going to talk through them anymore, seeing as they've been previously reported and recommended. So happy to take any questions now.
Your table 6, which is on my page 71 in the folder, when you've got charges there for filling tanks, why is it only Monday to Thursday? What's wrong with the Friday?
It's because it's a 2-day job. One day we take the restrictor out, and that the tank starts to fill, and the next day we come back and put the restrictor in. So if someone asks for a quick fill on a Thursday, we go there on the Thursday, we come back on the Friday. If they ask for it on the Friday, we go on the Friday, come back on the Saturday. So it becomes a weekend job.
So why can't you do it on the Friday and come back on the Monday?
We could do that, and we sometimes do. If the scheme can handle it, it means it's better for the resident because they get more water at full flow. But there might be times like this time of year when we might not be comfortable giving someone full flow for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and part of Monday. So we don't promise it, but we sometimes do it as a when we can.
Yeah, well, I mean, having been on the receiving end of a quick fill, and you need it when you need it.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that. In fact, there was a full weekday service, and you did look at when you come back and put the restrictor in, put it on the Monday if in fact it was a Friday.
Yeah. Like I say, we do that where we can, but I guess we don't promise it. As a rule, it would almost incentivize people to get them on the Friday because you get more water for your money.
Well, it's not more water; it's just it's filling up faster.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to use it. I mean, it's. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Just COPA's increases at 13%, and one of the things that's marked down here is increased sampling costs. Is that sampling at the source for the water that's going to the rest of the district? And if that is the case, are the Kaipoi scheme paying for the sampling for what's going out past its own scheme?
No, it's definitely sampling only Kaipoi ratepayers pay for sampling of water that's delivered to Kaipoi residents, and Rangiora pays for water that's delivered to Rangiora residents.
So why is that in the commentary particularly pointed out when it's not in the other commentaries? Because surely if they've got an increased,
yeah,
why do the others not?
Yeah, we had increased the sampling frequency particularly for untreated schemes and the larger untreated schemes, because the standards actually don't require a whole lot for secure source water, and it's really not, just doing the minimum isn't seen as enough by anyone in the industry, and it doesn't allow us to respond very well. If we did get in a bad result, there would be a big gap. So that's just the reason in general to increase. In terms of why one scheme and not the other, Rangiora has had sampling cost increases, but it's just it must have been balanced out by some other savings within the scheme, that it hasn't overall resulted in a rates rise. So that's just for Kaipoi, it's mentioned as that's part of the one cost that has increased on the scheme that's resulted in a net cost increase, but that's probably not the biggest reason why. There had been in Kaipoi in the previous year some discounting of the rates, so I think it was another annual plan cycle, there'd been similar kind of rates increase forecast, and it had been then tried to smooth out to phase it in. So there had been discounting of the rates the previous year, and that's now been removed, because you can't discount the rates every year, because it essentially.
But just for not for here, I'm not
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to dispute it here, but I'd like to see some more information on that, because I'm afraid I don't really get that equation. So for the future, not for now, but
Yeah.
I'd really like to see the differences there and why it's mentioned in one commentary when everybody said the same. I mean, I don't get how it would balance out on something, but yeah. So I'd like some more information on that in the future.
Yeah, with what the government's signalling with fluoride, have we made any, what's the cost if we have to fluoride all of our schemes? Have we got a, no, I mean fluoride. What's the Minister has indicated the District Health Board may be in charge of fluoridation now?
Yeah, that Councillor Williams is right. There's been some very recent signals about that. When we did get some advice on the cost to fluoridate a few years ago when the bill was first introduced, and then the bill just sat there and didn't seem to be going anywhere at all. So we haven't made budget provision to fluoridate. The cost is significant. I don't have the number in my head, but it's well into the millions of dollars if we were to do every single scheme. And it's only been the last couple of days I read that article that the Health Minister has been saying that it is something he wants to look into further, but there's a few steps away from where it is now to it actually becoming us fluoridating any of our supplies. The bill is written that it would give our district health boards the ability to make decisions regarding fluoridation, and then the district health board could decide to instruct us to fluoridate some or all of our supplies. So the bill would have to actually get passed, and then it would have to, have some kind of phase, and then the district health boards would have to think about it and think what supplies are top priority, and then there'd be some time for us to actually do it. So it is a key something to monitor for the future, but I haven't allowed for it right now.
Yes, Colin, thank you very much for your answers to my questions. They've been very, very helpful. I just want to tease a couple of them out a little bit more, particularly in terms of communication with our advisory groups, which I think is of critical importance. The first one is Gary Mayer, which is, you've stated in this public document that some unplanned costs occurred in 2021. Can you advise us what they were and why that hasn't gone through to the advisory group? So
the main thing was the well pump failed and was replaced, and that we have talked to the two key members of the advisory group about that, because they're also the two neighbours to the well site, and we talked about, as it was happening, we were telling them what was going on, so they're definitely well aware of that happening. We just haven't had a formal advisory group meeting about that particular thing.
So that
Yeah.
could be addressed going forward, that
Yeah.
we could let everybody know.
Yep.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I appreciate your commentary that it's similar to an old budget figure, but it's not similar to the
Yeah.
rate in the annual plan.
Yeah.
So thank you. The other ones were Summerhill and West Earton. The adding of lines into their budgets from 21-22 for inspection, servicing, maintenance, valves. Now, I appreciate Points Road has taken the lion's share of your attention in dealing with West Earton, Summerhill. But do you think it's appropriate to add budget lines in this year without having gone through that with the advisory board? Could it be deferred another year until that's been sorted?
So the reason those budget lines are not new work we're proposing on West End and Summerhill that we didn't used to do. We've always fixed valves when they failed or checked restrictors and that kind of thing. And all that had been picked up is in other budgets there was a certain set of budget lines under articulation, and then that feeds through to water unit job costing codes, and then it was slightly inconsistent with West End and Summerhill. The water unit do the same work on those schemes, but they didn't have as many GL codes to charge to, so they were charging one type of work and lumping it with another and just charging it to another line. So we're not doing anything differently, it's just more to tidy up.
So in that case, shouldn't those lines have gone down, which they haven't?
Yes, I think
So the budget's increased by those amounts rather than gone down?
Yeah, and that's because when we looked at past expenditure on the other rows, which had the two work types lumped together, we'd been overspending in past years. So we're not we're one way or another the budget's needed to increase, whether it's increased by one line by a lot or introduce a second line and then add a new charge.
So you're saying your maintenance budget had doubled in West Earton, for example, from 1,900 and adding on another 2,000?
Yeah, for that particular item, because
Okay.
it's not a lot of. It only takes a couple of jobs to spend that, and it's this issue with small schemes. It's very hard to
Appreciate
stick to
that.
such a small
So
budget.
how are you going to now communicate that back to the West Earton Summerhill Advisory Group?
Well, it had been brought up at a meeting in the past, and it was the way it was explained was they would like to go through. In the past, they had been through every row of a budget, and they said that would be a good thing to do in the future, but they were happy to just work on the Points Road joining for now, get that project done, and then, but they wanted to keep the group active and then do that more, once we're to a more business as usual state, then they can actually just review overall how's the scheme funded and that kind of thing.
So would it be possible for you to actually communicate those increases back to the group? Would
Yeah,
that be
that's
possible?
what will happen when
Thank
when we get to that point of meeting, going through the budgets as
Okay,
has been
cool.
requested, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess if no one else is just to say thank you, team. Excellent work. You're right over on top of your particular projects and all the schemes, and we've all talked pre-Christmas as we've worked into the stimulus, just how appreciative we are of all the work that's been done in the meetings. Councillor Williams and I have been to the Tuahiwi ones, and the one in Woodend last night. I understand, if I'm correct, that we're 21 out of 21 have signed up down at Fernside, is that right?
Yeah, definitely 20, and we're working on the 21st, so I
Right.
don't know if we've got that
So-
21st yet, but
And
very
so
close.
wish
Yeah.
Prince well with the Tuahiwi, but feedback we got was really positive actually at those particular exercises, so really good information that was there, so it was an excellent presentation, so thanks for all the work you're doing, appreciate it, thank you. Alright, we're now up to wastewater. Let's welcome Gavin to the table. Thanks, Colin. It's page
Afternoon, everyone.
Page 124, everyone. You've got no other reports in here that I picked up, so could give us a bit of an overview, and then there may be some questions. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, I'll run through a brief overview of the main points of the commentary. So, in terms of rates, generally the rates have decreased. Eastern districts and Oxford's have decreased for what was forecast. obviously with Fernside, Loban and Lee, their rates are changing with the connection to the Eastern District Sewer Scheme. That's going to happen over the next 12 months. The main points to consider in general is obviously in terms of stimulus projects, this commentary covers any funding that affects rates, the level of service and growth components, but doesn't cover the government funding. That's for Loban and Lee, Fernside and Tohiwi. Kaipoi capacity upgrade is a key point to note as part of this. So in the last LTP we would have been in construction now for the capacity upgrade, but we've done a lot of work in terms of modelling and monitoring in the network, and we've identified the main issue is in existing areas that have high I&I, inflow and infiltration into the network. So we looked at what would it cost to convey those high flows in the network to provide the level of service that's required. The cost was quite substantial, so what we're undertaking at the moment is to do more investigation work to understand the infiltration and inflow over the next 2 years, which is where you'll see in the OPEX budgets in Kaipoi. We have 140,000 next year, 110,000 the following year to undertake further investigations. And the purpose of that is to understand where the I&I is coming from, and if there is any opportunities to reduce that at a lower cost. But also noting that obviously with the shovel-ready projects, there's a clear linkage between high wastewater flows and drainage. So that's another reason why I would like to. We've pushed the capital budgets out to year 5 for the Kaipoi capacity upgrade, so we get a better understanding where to better spend that money. In addition to that, there's obviously Cridlin Street, which is a project which has also been pushed out. That's obviously a catchment in Kaipoi, so we're treating that the same. We've done a lot of work in Cridlin Street to understand where the high flows are coming. There's permanent monitors in the Cridlin Street catchment. So during weather events, we'll get a better understanding of where those high flows are coming from. And the approach we're taking is that we'd ideally like to target the source of the high flows as opposed to convey it out of Kaipoi through the network, because that has downstream effects. The Central Rangara capacity upgrade, that's going to carry on through years 1 and 4, and it'll be completed in year 4. That's on track. The most biggest change, similar to water in terms of CapEx, is due to the reduced renewals budget, which is as a result of our modelling in terms of renewals, has reduced quite substantially. If you do go to section 3.2 of the commentary, you'll see a similar graph that was on the water. So over 10 years, there's a 10% decrease in the 2020 annual plan CapEx over 10 years compared to the proposed budget for the CLTP. That's driven mostly by reduction in renewals budget, but also there's 1.8 million set aside for upgrading the Tohiwi pump station, which has been removed with the upgrades being undertaken part of the stimulus. In terms of OPEX, there's no major changes apart from in Kaipoi. We have brought some budget forward to for further work in sludge removal, but also to investigate, undertake some studies on. We've got quite a lot of sludge stored in Kaipoi on site, so we want to do analysis on that sludge to understand what we can use that for. Also, I mentioned before, budget to increase infiltration and inflow investigations in the Kaipoi network. Also have added budget for midge control at Kaipoi, which we're trialling at the moment and seems to be having some success. So we've included $20,000 in the Kaipoi budget for that. In terms of revenue charges, we've increased the trade waste fees, which they hadn't been changed for quite some time. So there's been a moderate increase in those charges. You also notice that we've added a fee in there for septage charges, which is when the new septage facility at Rangiora is completed, which will be hopefully in the fourth quarter of year one. There's fees in there to begin charging for receiving septage. Just go to recommendations. So including the recommendations is the approvals for the level of service performance measures, which is the report delivered to you and I. So I won't go through the detail, but the public won't notice any changes. It's just more how we report our level of service to make it more tight and also bring us more in line with our water. So there's some consistency. Questions?
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions? Paul? Sorry, Councillor Williams, followed by Councillor Stewart. Could you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
The ocean outfall, I can't see any budget in there for looking at better treatment sources, and because we've had quite a few complaints with water, and with our discharge we're probably going to have to upgrade it soon. There's no budget in there to see what we can do to improve things here. Should we be doing that ASAP?
We are currently drafting up a plan for consent renewal. Peter Marks is undertaking that for us. So out of that plan, we'll develop some budgets. Will be going to the next annual plan. But that is on the horizon to definitely look at long term. And we certainly are. Any upgrades we're undertaking, we're trying to think, you know, what's the long term potential consent conditions. So one of those examples is Woodend wastewater treatment plant upgrade was due for 2025. We've noted that we can push that out a bit further due to the capacity of the plant and growth predictions. So we're pushing it as far as we can to get that close to the consent renewal. The point there is deferring where we can significant capital investment until we know what those future conditions are.
Just there's nothing in this 10-year. We're going to wait till the consent expires.
So the work that Gavin was talking about, that we're looking at scoping to work out what budgets we actually need, that work will be undertaken from current asset management budgets. Our consent for the ocean outfall expires in 2038, so we really want to have a strategy that's kicking off about 10 years prior to that, so from about 2028 onwards. So this long-term plan period is about doing some pre-feasibility work to start scoping out budgets, and come 2024-34 long-term plan, that's where we will be actually putting additional budgets relating to the renewal of that consent.
So need to note that there is budget and it's under renewals for Oxford consent renewal, and also there should have been some budget in there for the there's a consent also in Rangiora that's going to require renewing.
I saw that. I just was concerned we're probably going to have some objections to our consent for the ocean outfall, and it'll probably look nice that we're trying to do something now and thinking about it, that's all.
Yep, okay. Thank you. So it's Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. On page 136, where I presumed that this is change in the trade waste charges, can you, so is whoever's bringing in the trade waste, are they required to test these parameters so you can charge in that way? And how much trade waste do we get? Because I always thought that our plants were really designed for domestic serve rather than trade waste.
We currently have 3 trade waste agreements, and that's predominantly in Kaipoi. And with those 3, we do undertake sampling once a month. So obviously there's a cost of undertaking sampling, so it's done monthly. They also have flow meters attached to the discharge, so we know the quantities. Now these charges won't immediately apply to those three. The agreements two of them will expire later this year. So when they are up for renewal, these charges will be applied. But obviously we have to talk to them. There are instances where we have minor trade wastes discharges. We wouldn't go and potentially monitor them and charge them. So there's a balance where it becomes economical to get enough information, such as this, to be able to charge them.
Councillor Stewart, can you use your microphone, please?
Were the three that we've got trade waste agreement?
Howlers, Foundation Foods, and Riverside Camping Ground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions?
Thank you.
Any general remarks anyone would like to add? Just same applies as what I said to Colin before, Gavin. Appreciate what you and your team are doing. In actual fact, I was talking about wastewater in the end of that last one, but in terms of the upgrades in Fernside and Tuahiwi, but very good presentations. I'm sure you impliedly took that. It's just with Colin sitting there, I just missed the subject heading, but those consultations have gone really well, and you and the team are doing a fantastic job. We really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So we're now at drainage. So it's under Kelly. So it's page 244. So any items you'd like to summarise there, Kelly, for us in the budget papers?
Yes, I'll just cover the key issues to consider. So shovel ready you'll be well aware of. So that's predominantly having a rating impact on Kaiapoi Urban in years 2, 3 and 4. One thing that was pointed out in terms of questions from Councillor Barnett was that the Kaiapoi Urban rate, which is currently 305, is shown going down to 295. And then increasing in year 2. So what I suggest we do there is either hold it at its current rate or smooth it so it doesn't actually drop then increase. The second point is loan repayments, and sorry, just jumping back to that last point, I believe that's something that finance can do as part of their finalisation of the budgets. Loan repayments, so there has been an increase in the Rangiora urban account, and that has been due to the Southbrook development contribution. So when that was set up quite a few years ago now, there were two parts for it. One was for existing properties within that Southbrook industrial area, and the other was for development. And what appears has happened is that the loan part of the existing properties was actually set up within the development contribution, but it was never, the loan repayments were never coming off the Rangiora urban account. So they've effectively had a period of time where they haven't been making those loan repayments. That's now been identified, and we've included the loan repayments kicking off, and that's actually increased the amount we need to rate from Rangiora Urban by 72,000 per year, and that is one of the main reasons that their rates have increased by about 20%. Cust Rural Drainage, also a loan repayment, and that's because the account is in deficit by $26,000. And to actually pay that loan off is actually having quite a significant impact on the Cust scheme. You'll note that it's increasing by about 50%. Drainage maintenance budgets. So we are increasing one, which is Central Rural, by 15%. Last year we increased it by 10%, but we're continually spending a lot on maintenance in that area. this is something that's been discussed with the advisory group, and they are supportive of the rates being increased to cover the maintenance works being undertaken. Just under overheads, insurance and public education, there's some general notes about other increases. One thing that's worth noting is in terms of our education budgets, we reduced them by 50% as following COVID-19 for the 2021 financial year. We've continued that on at the lower rates within the long-term plan as a cost-saving measure. Going through the next table, there's 4 that I just wanted to highlight quickly. So the water zone work is having a 29% increase, and that's because we have changed how we are treating what was referred to as minor capital works under that budget. It was set up originally for 3 years and it was loan funded. We're now continuing it on as an ongoing annual payment, which effectively means we need to treat it as operational expenditure because we need to recover those costs in any 1 year. So while we haven't increased the budget, we've changed how we're funding it. Rather than loan funding, it's being charged for in 1 financial year, so that's the reason for the 30% increase there. Renewal or urban, I've already talked about the increase there. Coastal urban has an increase predominantly due to new stormwater management areas that are coming online. So they get constructed, we need to maintain and operate them, yet the full development hasn't come out, so we've been extended, so we don't have the ratepayers coming through. So that again was a question from Councillor Barnett about whether that is fair and equitable for effectively existing ratepayers to be funding the maintenance of new infrastructure. I can definitely see that side of it, but equally the new people that are coming online, they're actually going to be paying for upgrades in the future for the existing areas to comply with higher quality standards as well. So I think it's in the category of you're never going to have a perfectly fair system. There's going to be swings and roundabouts in terms of who pays for what. One thing I did have a look at for the coastal urban was over the long-term plan period, the rates continue to increase. So even though it's not the situation that we're spending a lot now, we get more growth and then the rates drop back down. So it does reflect that there are other projects, level of service related, that will be being paid for by both existing and new properties. And the final one down there is CUST, which I've already talked about, that has quite a significant increase in rates. The capital works program over the 10 years actually has changed quite significantly, and I've listed out the projects that have been revised and also the projects with new budgets. Happy to take any questions on any of those projects, but the key thing there is while we've had all these changes, the net effect is still the same. We're still spending about $40 million over the 10-year period. So where we've brought in a new specific project, we've actually dropped out another project. So particularly for some of the quality projects, we actually had lump sum holding budgets that were peeled out some of that budget from to make sure there's no net increase over the 10 years. Similar to water and wastewater, there are also level of service changes that were in that report to UNR. So I'm assuming that everyone has seen those recommendations. I've got paper copies here if anybody hasn't seen those revised recommendations. And the final thing from me before taking questions, there was a query from the roading budgets this morning regarding the handrails on Dudley Drain that are well overdue to be painted. So we will look at scoping that work. In terms of budget needs, we believe we can address that via existing budgets. We have the Kaiapoi minor stormwater improvement budgets, which is about $30,000 each year. And it may even be that there is budget available within the current financial year to be able to arrange that to be done. So we will put that on the list of projects to address. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Kelly. Did you say you had some revised papers there, did you? Just in case. Perhaps if you've got them there, just circulate them. Might as well see them. Yes, Councillor Doody. Thank you.
Kelly, just a wee query please on page 251 with Oxford Urban, that you're decreasing that by 8k. I'm just wondering why you're doing that when there's work still to be done. That could have sat in Kitty just to help with some of the 251, yeah. I'm just wondering why you're decreasing it when it might be better just to leave it sitting in there to help with other flooding issues.
I'll just flick to the sheet. So we're still actually holding the all of the maintenance budgets the same. So from an expenditure point of view, we're effectively saying that when it's looked at in terms of the account balance, we don't actually need to collect those rates. So we're not reducing any of the expenditure. So your question is, can we still hold it at the previous amount?
Yes.
I guess we could do, but looking at it from an account balance perspective, there's not a requirement to.
But I just thought, well, that would help towards, wouldn't that help towards future work that needs to be done?
Well, what it would do, it would actually mean that if there are expenditure not currently predicted within here, it would mean the account's in a much healthier position for any unexpected expenditure.
Yeah, I'd rather, my thoughts are, and it's just for you to think about, was I'd rather have a smoothing thing going across than ups and downs.
Okay, yep, and I believe we could do that similar to the Kaiapoi Urban, effectively manage it as part of a smoothing exercise.
Yeah. So I had Councillor Redmond followed by Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Kelly. On our page 254, Mansfield Park secondary flow improvements, that now seems to include Kiln Place. It was my recollection that Kiln Place was going to have improvements either this year or next year. Given the extreme weather events we're now having with heavy rainfall and the likelihood of flooding, is this something that should be put out to year 5 when I thought it was going to be this year or next year?
So the investigation work we've undertaken on Kiln Place, so we do have budget this year and next financial year, and it's still planned to spend that money. What we're looking at doing, and there'll be a report coming to UNR on this, is actually doing works to improve the inlet capacity, so increasing the sump capacity at Kiln Place. We had originally intended that we would be able to improve the secondary flow within Kiln Place. So that was potentially diverting water into Isaac, is it Newton Place or Isaac Wilson Place? Thank you. Or potentially through the reserve into Cannonstack Place and out to the Kaikanui Street. So the investigation work that we've undertaken has identified that that is not feasible. So we're still planning to proceed with the first phase, which is improving the inlet capacity, but what we've actually identified is that Kiln Place is actually the low point for secondary flow from that whole Mansfield Park development. So we actually need to look at a more strategic solution for it, and it's not an easy fix. So we're still proceeding with phase 1 of the Kiln Street project, but have put this additional budget in, acknowledging that we've got a secondary flow issue that we need to take more of a strategic catchment approach to address.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. The East Belt to Cam River connection proposal, whereabouts are you proposing to go into the headwaters of the Cam River with that?
So that is part of the northeast Rangiora development area, and that connection would be along a potential extension of a road from Keir Street in Eastbelt, so at the southern end of the high school block that extends in an easterly direction. Exactly where it would connect into the headwaters of the Cam River is still to be determined, but it's probably effectively, if you're familiar with that area, where that homestead is, just to the east of the
not
high school block.
Not on Golf Links Road.
No,
Further back.
No, closer,
So
more
north.
closer to the boundary of the high school block.
Just there's some very nice springs up there that we don't want stormwater.
Okay.
No matter how nice. But the second question now is, you've got a box drain improvements in Wood End, and then you refer to box drain on page 256, and you're talking about Oxford. Is there 2 box drains, or is that Flanagan's drain?
Sorry,
So 255 box drain improvements in Wood End, talking about a pollutant trap, because that one in Wood End, and then on the next page 256 you talk about box drain again, and you're talking the commentaries about Oxford. Is that Flanagan's, or is that another box
Correct.
drain?
That should say Flanagan's drain. That's an error within the table itself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Bartlett.
Thanks, Kelly and Jared, for answering all my questions so well. I've just got one I just wanted to tease out a wee bit more, and it's actually a question for Jared, and it's a strategic question of all of our infrastructure when we're adding on subdivisions to smaller settlements. For example, in this case, it's coastal urban, where we've got Ravenswood and Two Woods subdivisions are now increasing the rates on current ratepayers on quite a small ratepayer base, and those areas haven't been built yet, so we can't collect rates on the people who are there. That's happening with upgrade to pump stations. It happens with in the previous budget. Are we looking at a more equitable way to manage the OPEX of that going forward when it's on small, like if it's Rangiora Kaipo, it doesn't hardly make a dent, but when it's a small subdivision, if we had a subdivision at Swananoa or at Mandeville, how can we make that equitable when some of those subdivisions are taking a long time to develop?
So it is a really good question, and it does apply across all of the 3 waters. Drainage in particular is a little bit different. So generally, as a rule, when we add on more ratepayers to a scheme, it actually the benefits generally outweigh the costs. So you do get more costs with the new assets that are being supplied to the scheme, but you get more ratepayers, and generally the economies of scale come into effect, particularly when we're getting gifted assets. And you would have seen in the modelling that Jeff presented this morning, a lot of those long life assets that we get brand new, the way we manage to fund the replacement of those, that really helps us by putting that wave way in the future. So on the whole, it's a really good thing. There's 2 situations where you can have an increase in rates. One is when you are putting in a big piece of infrastructure, say we're putting in a big wastewater pump station or something, and then you have to, you're taking out a loan on it and funding it. in most cases, that happens on big schemes like the likes of the Eastern Districts, or that's really where it mostly happens, and we can manage that pretty well just because of the scale of it. With drainage, particularly on the smaller schemes, what tends to happen is we take on new drainage infrastructure that has attenuation and treatment facilities in it, and they do have an ongoing maintenance cost even from day one. Now, and you could end up in a situation where the existing ratepayers, their rates go up to start funding that. Over the medium term, that's again will be to the benefit of the ratepayers, because we've just been busy getting our network discharge consents for our stormwater, and they will start to over time require additional works in existing parts of town. And when you've got the bigger scheme, now you've got more ratepayers that will help fund that. So over the course of people's, I suppose, life cycle within the town, they are probably better off having those developments connecting, particularly given when you're retrofitting stormwater treatment into existing areas, it can be quite expensive, and you're not getting it gifted by a developer. So look, it's like all of our rates, it's not always exactly fair for any one particular year, but overall the benefits are generally felt by the existing ratepayer because of development.
Okay, any further questions? All right. Any general comments anyone would like to make? Thanks, T. So, sorry, did I miss someone? No? Oh, thank you. Stock water races were included, or is that in addition to? Are you dealing with that separately? Page stock water races 398404.
So no key issues with stock water apart from, similar to drainage, there is a change to level of service as well. So I'll run that around while answering any questions.
I'll run the paper around, not go for a run around. I was thinking all you need is a good header dog and you'll be fine. Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Okay, do you want to take us through, Kelly? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of stock water, there's no key things to note there. It's just got a standard nominal 3.75% increase. In terms of the level of service, so there is a change in target for service requests within 48 hours with a target of 95%. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? That's fairly clear. Oh, Councillor Stewart, sorry.
The general one, Waimaka Irrigation administers the stock water system, maintains it for us, and also in conjunction does its own irrigation scheme. We pay them for that service, and it's only relatively recently that I think that the amount that is paid to Waimaka Irrigation for the maintenance and administration of our stock water race should actually be made public. and it's not. I've never seen it in any of our budgets, and I think it's last year we renewed and reviewed the contract and paid them more. That's why we have the charges we have.
So your question to staff is if not, why not? Yes.
Why isn't that public as part of this budget? What we're paying to our contractor, exclusive use or an exclusive service.
The figure for race maintenance is on page 403. So there's a figure there of 272,100. Now that is predominantly what we actually pay to them, but there is also an allowance for additional charges for things that come up operationally throughout the year that aren't covered by the agreement. So I believe the figure, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's about $20,000 less than that.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Doherty? Councillor Redmond?
Kelly, on page 402, maintenance of roadside stock water races. You say if council were to take over maintenance, this would have a significant impact on stock water rates. If the adjoining landowners are happy to maintain these areas, if it's not broken, do we need to fix it?
No, we wouldn't. Where possible, we would want the existing landowners to continue to main the races within the front of their property. There are a few locations within our district, such as along Tram Road, where that type of operation is difficult for landowners to do safely when it comes to all the traffic management requirements. So our intention is, we still see it as being the most efficient way of doing it, is relying on property owners to maintain the race and providing them advice on that. But we see more and more with higher health and safety and traffic management requirements that there are going to potentially be more races that we will need to bring into being council maintained.
Councillor Blackie, please.
Page 402, Kelly, the the suggestion of MAR, more directly, feeding wastewater into lowland streams. Have you any more thoughts and progress and been done on that?
From a stock water race perspective, effectively what we're doing is just monitoring the overall length of our water races, enclosures, and making sure that any changes within the stock water race system is not having any change in the aquifer recharge that's occurring. I'm aware that Will are doing some work that's actually looking at more targeted or constructed managed aquifer recharge systems.
Okay. Any further questions? Any general comments? Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Now we'll come to Jared's overheads. So it's pages 405 to 412. Thanks, Jared.
Okay, thank you. Look, I actually I think I'll just talk to the actual budget sheets on pages 411 and 412, because the commentaries, well, the words are fine, but the tables in the commentary aren't really helpful in understanding just because of the format. So I'll start in the on page 411, the roading section, and just draw your attention to the key numbers there. So you'll see the operation on the operations line, just directly under the roading heading. In the annual plan in 2021, there's 309,000. That was forecast to go to 315. and in this budget it's 462. So now that is the result of the roading, an additional position in the roading team, and we've called them the roading strategy team leader. Now I think I've discussed this on a number of times with the council. We're severely under-resourced as a council in this area. And the key things are things like developing our roading strategies. We've had quite a change in focus from Waka Kotahi. We are not providing the same level of resources our key partners, and particularly the city, in terms of this kind of an area. It's really critical in terms of integrating with our land use planning and development that we've got. And also management of the capital works program. So effectively, a lot of the focus for Don Young has been actually to try and backfill this role as much as possible, and otherwise it's being borne by the roading manager, and it's unsustainable. So that's been put into the budget. We have discussed that with Waka Kotahi, and we're expecting a positive response to their co-funding of that position. So that's something I hope I have canvassed pretty well and hasn't come as a surprise to you. The next one to look at is in the Three Waters. The key line there is again under operations. You've got currently 1.05 million, was projected to go to 1.06, and in the proposed LTP we've got 1.126. Now that is for the asset analyst role, so there is some commentary on that. I actually think Jeff gave a really good example of the value we can extract out of a role like this in his presentation today, where we were talking about the confidence that we have in our asset management systems without and we are doing a lot of things, but without someone in Three Waters who's continuing to get that information that we're going to get out of our new AMIS system, put that into our asset management practices, we won't be able to keep up in that kind of activity. So that again is a very a crucial role for us, and it's hard to give you a tangible figure in terms of the value, other than the sort of those sorts of figures that you were looking at this morning. When you look at the total value of those assets and the complexity of the assets, it's really important that we've got a good understanding of those when we're making far-reaching decisions. Now the third one I'll draw your attention to is on page 412 under land drainage. Operations line again, and you'll see it was projected at 370,000. And in the LTP we've got 409 in year one, but you'll notice in year two that goes to 562. So that is predominantly around the waterways and drainage manager role, and you'll recall that we have allocated some of our stimulus funding for the front end of that position. So we are actually trying to recruit into that role, and we've got it as part of our signed off agreement for the stimulus funding, 18 months worth of funding, and that's why you see it phasing in on those tables. But the full effect will start to be felt from 22-23 for that role, and that that role is to just manage that expanding area of need. We've got a wastewater asset manager, we've got a water supply asset manager, but we definitely do have a deficiency in that waterways and drainage area, and the demand keeps on growing in that area, from both from operational and again from the compliance end of the spectrum. So look, I'm happy to take any questions on these budgets. Otherwise, other than those three positions I've talked to, the budgets are pretty much just straight out as they were previously.
Any questions? Councillor Bickey?
Strategy leader, Jared, is that figure, that increase, is that the co-funded figure?
Correct.
Or is it
That's correct.
full
That's
figure?
the full figure.
yeah.
That's the full figure with the co-funding.
With the co-funding.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions? Any general comments? Well, Jared, can I just, I'd like to commend you particularly on the workload that you have managed in this last budget period has been immense. Both you and indirectly Kelly as well. I know Kelly's been putting in some unreal hours, I've heard. I know all our staff are working hard, but in particular, I think you do an awesome job, and we're very lucky to have you in the role you're performing. You manage it so well, and all the demands that you get from elected members, and answering calls at all hours of the day and responding at all hours of the day too. So thank you. I think these extra amounts are absolutely justified, particularly in the area of roading in particular, and that extra support that we do need at the Greater Christchurch level, because there is just simply a lot of work in the transport space. So needed the extra support. I will certainly appreciate there, because there's a lot of when we get meeting notice, it's often the papers don't come out until quite short notice, and that extra support that I get to be able to represent our council well is appreciated. So if that helps in that capacity, that helps us get projects over the line, the ones that we were talking about earlier. So I fully support that, but thanks for all the work that you do, and you too, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. And I just really want to reinforce it's the people who are working in the UNR department across the board, particularly the managers who report to me. They do an incredible job. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving forward. PDU. Okay, PDU. Kelly. Thank you. From one Kelly to another. Thank you. So we're on page 413.
So we've got the PDU budgets as well as item 4.3 in the main agenda. So happy to take them in whichever order you prefer.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Okay, so you've got a paper first, Kelly, haven't you? 4.3. Okay. Yep.
Budget first?
Yeah, okay.
Budget sheets.
Budget sheets, so pages 413. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I suppose the key things with the PDU is that this unit is a self-funding unit, so we don't take any rates funding directly. We fund all of our costs through the hourly charge-out rate that we charge on capital works projects, and we adjust our staff levels to meet the demands from our capital works and renewals programs that we undertake on behalf of our clients. There has been some change to our budgets this year, and some of that has been through the addition of 2 additional roles within the civil projects budget area. And also there's been some small changes, in particular in the development team budgets for administration and subdivisional issues, and that's really just based on the fact that we have had some changes in our staff, and those budgets come from a direct percentage of staff time. So when staff changes and salaries change, that changes the budgets, and that's why those have gone up from what has been predicted. Our hourly charge-out rates will go up for the next financial year, though I have not finalized what those are going to be yet, but expect them to go up nominally. And that hourly charge-out rate not only covers our costs, but also funds various work that the unit undertakes, including acting as the procurement center of excellence for the whole of the organization, and also covers quite a bit of the development inquiries, pre-application meetings, finished 4-level inquiries, and the work that PDU does in that regard. So those are probably the key areas that I wanted to point out to you today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions of Kelly. Kelly, we had Alistair Cameron before Christmas. Just remind me, I think we requested a report from memory, didn't we? Is that coming
Yes.
to a future meeting? Yes.
Yes, that went through
February,
management
yes.
team yesterday and is coming to the next council meeting.
Great, thank you. Just double check that.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions of Kelly either? Same applies with what I said before. Really appreciate your work, Kelly, you and the team. It's been to a number of meetings because you're under your amount of scrutiny with development contributions. I'm always impressed with how well you deal with that.
Thank you.
Because it's not an easy space to be in at times, but you handle it really well, you and the team. So thank you.
Thank
Okay, so with that we'll come to your report 4.3, which is tab 5.
Yep.
Thank you.
So this report is the draft development contribution schedules, which are based on the various capital works budgets that are for growth. So the overall philosophy with the development contributions taken is that growth is self-funding. However, it is important to note that development contributions aren't the only costs. It don't represent the only infrastructure costs that are related to developments. It's often just the trunk infrastructure that's included with development contributions, and developers do have to provide a lot of other infrastructure that's not covered through development contributions. I suppose some key changes with this year's schedules is there are several new development contribution areas for new growth areas that we are looking to service. In particular, the outer East Rangiora, which is that inch farm, as well as some of the mixed-use business areas in Kaiapoi, and the two new DCs or changed DCs as part of the stimulus projects. There are also quite a number of projects that have been added to the district routing DC, which have listed in the report, and so that has had an impact on the district routing DC as well. So have tried to summarize as best I could the reasons for all of the changes that have occurred to the various development contributions, and what the impact of the DCs likely are for developers in specific areas, with total DCs ranging anywhere from about $30,000 up to the mid 50s, close to $60,000 per lot in some of the development areas. So I am happy to take any questions that you have on the schedules.
Okay. Any questions? PSO. So there's a recommendation. Someone prepared to move. Moved by Councillor Doody, seconded by Councillor Atkinson. Any discussion? Just finally, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just like to say, Kelly, thank you very much. You do a great job, and not always a rewarding job from some clients, but you do it great. And so thank you very much.
Councillor Atkinson. Any further speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Kelly. So I think that's you doing. Well done, Jared. Who's next up? Yeah, Chris. Okay, that's right. Brief break. Why don't we just have afternoon tea break now, and then we can just make sure Simon's ready for 3:15.